So let us discuss about one concept. So the one concepts are, as you know, it's a one. So when we say one, it's beyond some geographical scope. So it's an example of the one is usually the internet. So we'll see here the different one technologies overview, and we'll also see, we'll select different one technology options. We will compare with the private and public. We'll also compare the private and public IP addresses. So we have the private IP addresses, we have the public IP address, the public one technologies. Sorry. So we have the private and the one technologies. So we'll discuss about these concepts also. And on the overview part, we'll discuss about what the purpose of the one purpose, how does it operate, how does it function. So we'll see about these concepts. So why do we need one? You can see that whenever you want to connect multiple different areas together, so you will use what? One. For example, here, let us assume that all these users are interconnected users. So here you have a remote, we can say a remote user or student. Here you have somebody using the resources from the, we call it telecommuter, and also we have different remote sites which want to access some of the resources of the campus. So these different people who are not in the campus, who are remotely available, whenever they want to access resources from their campus, they need to have some mechanism of accessing their resource. So the only option that they have now is one, because they cannot access it directly from their office. So what we say is one is something that usually operates beyond some geographical scope. So you don't have usually, if the network is not, unless and otherwise the network is not available, it doesn't have some geographic limitations. So the main purpose we need one is whenever we want to connect different and some enterprise LAN with remote LANs. So if you have an enterprise LAN, some enterprise LAN, just like this one. So here you have some enterprise LAN which wants to remotely communicate with different users that you have here. So all this we call it one. So a one is usually, this is the key concept, it is owned by, who is owner of one? It is a service provider. In our context, it's the Ethiopian Telecommunication is the one who is going to own it. So whenever we want to use that, we have to pay some fee. That's the critical concept. So we must pay a fee for the service provider to use one network. So in that case, the service provider will provide us the links with remote areas or remote sites using either data or voice or video. So if we pay our payment. So if we don't have LAN, we would be what? We would be a kind of an isolated network. So isolated networks will be communicated only when we have one. So isolated LANs will be connected using the one. So if you have this kind of, if let us say you have some network in USA, some network in Africa, some network or something, you're one of the companies in South America. So whenever you want to communicate this one with this one, so if you want to communicate these different remotely available areas, you cannot connect them to the LAN because they're not in the same campus or in the same area. The only option that you have is to request to be connected by the service provider. Also, the service provider is the one who is going to connect these different remotely available areas. So that's, in that case, we will pay for the cable for different infrastructure that we are using. So that's what we call it isolated networks. So our isolated network will be connected using the one option. So as the organization sector, the main reason that we require this kind of one is organizations do expand through time. Their businesses will be larger and broader in geographic scope and capacity. So if we have, so we in this case, so we have what? In that case, we have some of them will be a regional branch. So in that case, we might have regional branch. So regional branch, our offices will be available sometimes, and also we have you want to share your information with the customers, and also travelers, employees who usually travel, or the ones we communicate. All of these people want to communicate with their organization or with their banks at the remote sites. This kind of provision is made by the ones. Usually we call it internet nowadays. So there are two types of WAN topologies. We call them one-to-what? We call them point-to-point topology and the hub and spoke topology. And the hub and spoke topology is it's just like similar with the LAN connection of switch. Point-to-point connection is usually very expensive. You'll have a direct link between you and the organization. So there is no sharing, but in this case, multiple users will share some of the resources that are available. So from multiple aspects, the hub and spoke topology is cheaper, and multiple users will be connected through either hub site or the virtual circuits, or sub interfaces will be used. And others are which are not realistic, but we can say that which can be used usually by the service providers so that their networks will not fail. One of them will be mesh topology, where each device have an interconnection with every other device in that case. So this is very expensive from the cable wise, but it is very reliable, as you can see, because there is no, we can say there is almost failing will be handled seamlessly. So in this case, you'll see that there is some engineering facility. So you can see the developments from this one. So here you have Span Engineering Company. So we are ideally going to move the company. So initially that the organization, the one that we called the Span Engineering, was initially, it was a small organization which has 15 employees. So initially there was only 50 employees in the organization. So this is a small organization. They are usually in one local area. So in this case, you can connect them through one LAN. One LAN will be enough, and if you use a DSL, the DSL internet, it will be they can easily share this DSL internet among themselves. So this is the small network. So now the network has upgraded itself. It has become a kind of a campus network. So a campus network is you can see this is a campus network. In the campus network, now previously there was only 15 employees. Now the organization has expanded too much and have created what kind of situation? In this case, we have multiple users. So still they are in one local area, but they are connected as a campus connection. You can see it building all. They are separated based on the departments, and they are connected through firewalls. And in this case, we can say that now the organization has upgraded. Now, what does the organization require? The organization requires an in-house staff members who can handle this network. So now we have what kind of network? We can say a medium-sized network. So the network is not as such huge, but it's a medium-sized network. So this one is a medium-sized network. And in this case, you can see now the Span Engineering Company has expanded very well. Now it has so many remote offices. So these remote offices need to be connected. So if you have an organization that's very huge, that's very distributed, in this case you need to use some kind of one connection options. So here now you have multiple branch offices, regional offices, and so on. Sometimes you might have a distributed network, and in the case of distributed network, you'll have different issues. Now let us talk about the OSI model. The one usually there are different protocols that are used by one. Usually the one protocols that we use are HDLC, PPP, frame relay, Ethernet 1, and MPLC. These are the different types of protocols that we use them at the one level. I think you do remember that IP was at the network level, the IP was at the network level, and TCP was at the transport layer protocol. So now you can see that whenever you have the one connection, one usually will use these two protocols, especially HDLC and PPP for point-to-point. Whenever you have a shared network, usually we use a frame relay. So these kinds of networks are protocols that are used by the data link layer of one protocol. So one usually focuses on the physical and data link layer, because we do know that ones operate usually not on the based on, whenever you relay a message from between the routers, usually they will use the data link layer protocol and the physical layer protocols. So I think we do know that layer 1 specifies electrical and mechanical signals. Layer 2 signifies data encapsulation and different issues. So whenever you have one, so there are some terminologies that we use. So for example, in this case we have, so you have service provider. The service provider have a central office which is nearer to the organization, so we call this one the local central office. And the distance from this local central office to the campus or to the company, we call that what? The local loop. So this is the distance or the cable between the local central office and the nearby device of an organization. So, and also the device that are directly communicates with the telecommunication equipment, we call it data communication equipment or DCE. And the one that directly connects with the LAN, with the internal network, we call it DTE. So usually routers will have a combination of DTE and DCE in one device. So in any way, you need to know this kind of stuff. So this is the service provider or the telecommunication networks, and so these are the central office switch. So these are usually the way that the devices go through to reach the destination. So you'll have what? You'll have this kind of arrangements. So there are different types of one device. So some of them, we call them the access servers. So these access servers are used whenever you have a dial-up modem. So whenever you have a dial-up, usually now it's becoming obsolete, and it's becoming out of the market nowadays. So the access server will directly connect with the dial modems. So and also we have another CSU, DSU devices that will enable you to connect, especially these three networks. This network, this one, the public switch telephone network, the cable network, and the dial-up of the access server. They work by converting the data from the analog signal to digital signal. So whenever you have the data in this network, usually it is in the analog format. Whenever it reaches to the PCs, the modems will convert them into, so you can see here we have modem here also. Here we have modem. So the modem, what is the purpose of the modem? The purpose of the modem is converting analog data from the one to the digital data of the LAN. So that's the usual purpose of modems. But in the case of the routers by themselves will be able to communicate digitally. They don't need the analog digital conversion concept. So that's why we don't have what? We don't have, in the case of CSU, DSU case, In the case of router, we don't have modems because they can digitally communicate. So digital communication. So we have said that the dial-up modem is becoming a legacy. It's no longer. Access servers are also becoming legacy. They are more or less similar to the dial-up modems. And broadband modem is we usually use with the public switch telephone network or the usual telephone networks. We use them in that kind of structure. So the broadband modem is it will be enable us to transfer the digital subscriber line, which is in the high speed. So it's more or less similar with the voice band modem, but here you have speed, transmission speed, and broadband frequency, high broadband frequency. These two are very critical in the case of modems. Nowadays, we can say that in Ethiopia, most of private businesses are owning this kind of structure of the DSL structure. So they purchase so still they are using what kind of stable structure? The public switch network. So the network that has been constructed for the purpose of the voice is called the public switch telephone network. So that network has been used by the broadband modem. So we said that what was the purpose of CSU-DSU? The purpose of CSU-DSU is what? CSU-DSU is it will purpose is it will send and receive digital data, not analog to digital conversion. So this is why we call it. So in this case, we need what? The routers are usually what kind of device? They are layer 3 devices, so they do work based on IP addresses. In the same manner, the core switch or the multi-layer switch will work on that scenario. So there are two types of data transmission operations. One of them we call it circuit switching. So one of them we call it what? One of them we call them circuit switching. Another one we call it what kind of switching? Packet switching. In the case of circuit switching, I think this is similar with whenever we use our phone to call somebody. So first, before communication, you need to have a ringing. So it will ring. Whenever this person starts speaking the phone, this path will not be used by any other device before the completion of communication between phone A and phone B. Whenever phone A and phone B finished, this line will be free or available for others to be used. Otherwise, until the communication is terminated between A and B, no other person, either by force or willingly, will not take this path from here to here. So whenever they leave and release their resources, the other person can communicate through that network. So this is kind of structure, we call it what? Circuit switching. So all the packets, they will take the same path from starting to the end. So there is no message subdivisioning. So the message by itself will have a sequence because it's following the same path for all message sending and receiving. So this is what we call it circuit switching. So it's based on circuit. So I think you do remember that whenever you call somebody on the network, the network will not say that the network is full, we cannot accommodate any more users for the phone. So there is no such thing in the case of packet switching. But in the case of circuit switching, if the limit of reach no other people can use unless and otherwise those users who are using the network release for different circumstances. So this kind of network we call them what? Circuit switching. So circuit switching, so before communication, you need to have a dedicated circuit between the dialer and between the sender and the receiver. So circuit switching will be dynamically established. That means whenever there is a request for communication, whichever network path available, it will be used by the senders and the receivers. So this kind of network, the two most common networks that are used for us for such purpose are what? The two most commonly networks are what? The public switch telephone network and the integrated service digital network. So these are the two. So we say that the public switch telephone network is used by what? By the DSL. So it will use this network will use what kind of network? The voice network to transmit digital data. So that's why we need to have a modem in this case, because the network which has been constructed upon the base network is for the transmission of voice, but we can send through that voice network a data message. So this kind of network we call it circuit switching. But in the case of packet switching, a message will be first, they will be divided into different portions. So for example, here you have server 1 is trying to communicate between server 2, so server 2 is trying to communicate with server 1, but some of the messages will take this way, other messages will take this way. So there is no specific path to reach from the source to destination. Whichever path available, the packet will take that passage one. Another is the package is subdivided and it is ordered. There is order, sequence. So if there is some kind of loss, the sender and the receiver, or the source and the destination, they can communicate and they can resend the message based on that one. So you don't need circuits to be established before sending, or this was circuit establishment is done through what? It is done through the circuit switching. Now in the case of packet switching, the packet will be splitted and they will take different paths to reach the network. So some of them will take different paths, but at the end they will be configured and rearranged at the destination. So when we see the packet switching is cheaper but not secure, there are two types of networks in this case: connection oriented and connectionless. When we say connectionless, means the receiver and the sender may not be available at the same time. So in that case we say that what kind of communication? Connectionless. So user, there is no acknowledgement, there is no aside things in that case, so we call that kind of communication connectionless. Connection oriented, first you need to have some kind of predetermined path, and you need to have a predetermined configuration between you and. So we said in general the one network is subdivided into two portions. What are these two portions? There is a private portion and there is a public portion. What does it mean, the private? The private means organizations who are communicating through that network will not share their network with other individuals. So this kind of network, we call it what? Private. And the other case, we call it what? Public. Just like the internet. Internet is public. Everyone can share and use the network for their purpose. So the security is either by the service provider or by yourself. So, but in the case of the private network, you have a dedicated network. It's just like creating your own path. No other people will use that. And in the case of private also, there are two types of privates. One of them we call it dedicated. Dedicated means the path is specifically between the source and destination. Switched means this just like a phone. Whenever there is some path which is available, that path will be taken by the device which has been waiting to access the network. So in that case we call that switched network. So in the case of dedicated, nobody will share the network, but in the case of switching, it's just like going somewhere. And so there are two types of circuiting. We said what were they? The circuit switching and packet switching. So their difference is with respect to. So usually the leased line, or what we call it leased line, that's a kind of dedicated network, which is a kind of private network, which is a kind of one. So this one of the examples of leased line is T1 and E1, or T3 E3. And another example of circuit switching, which is a kind of switched network, we call it the public switched telephone network and the ISDN. And then another one is the packet switched network. In this case, you have the different types of arrangements, but in the case of the packet switching arrangement, you have multiple options. So the Metro Ethernet, the MPLS, the frame relay, the ATM, All of these, they work based on the packet. So what the difference between packet switching and circuit switching? The packet switching, the message is subdivided, it's ordered, the subdivided components can take different paths to reach their destination. But in the case of the circuit switching, the communication between the source and destination is through one network, and it's not shared among others. And in the case of the internet, the network all is shared to everybody. It's very public. So from security perspective, public networks are very low from the security perspective. Other infrastructures that we call them the dense wavelengths division multiplexing. It's a kind of fiber optics principle where you use the between the service provider networks. So whenever you have service provider networks, they will, when they want to translate message, they will use, so you these three types of networks, or two types of, we call them. The first one is DWDM, and that's the first one, the older ones, the SONET and the ACDH. They are used by the service provider. So the kind of network that we are talking about now is the service provider network. So service providers, they use what kind of fiber optics media? We call it what? We call it the WDM and the ACDH protocol. So service providers will use. So the first types of, now we're going to discuss one by one. So here now we're going to discuss first the leased line. We'll discuss this one. Then we'll discuss about the circuit switching networks. Then we will discuss about the packet switching networks. And then we will discuss, if time permits, with the broadband VPN. So leased line is a kind of, what kind of network is it? It is dedicated line, we say that. The connection between the receiving error and the sender will not be shared with other networks. So it's safe, it's secure. That's why we call it the leased. So we are going to buy some line from, it depends on the speed. So if you want very high speed, you are going to pay more, and you are going to purchase that line for a specified time. And they have different names for leased line. So we call it leased circuit, serial link, serial line, T1, E31. All of this is used for the name, a synonym for the leased line. So leased lines, they have usually in the America, you have T1, the speed you can see small, 1.544, and another one is usually, so the North Americans use the T signal and the Europeans use the E signal. So that's the difference between these two. So the dial-up, as we said previously, it has become obsolete nowadays, so we don't need to use them, and the same applies with the SDN. So, but it uses the principles of the public switch telephony. So frame relay, it's a kind of a packet switching network. So now we have finished the first one, which is the circuit switching in the leased line network. Then we came with the now we discussed about the different types of networks. So some of their networks are, we call them the circuit switching, like the public switch telephone network, the SDN. Now we are speaking about the frame relay. For the frame relay, it's a frame relay. It's the concept of frame relay is more or less similar with the switching concept. So it works on the layer 2 non-broadcast multi-access principle. So it's just like the switch technology, so that it can connect multiple enterprise LANs, so that they can share the cost to connect multiple sites. So the asynchronous transfer mode, or ATM, it's based on, this one is constructed based on cell-based architecture. So you have specified fixed sized data for transmission, that's 53 bytes. and they can carry multiple traffics at the same time. So they can carry multiple traffics. Previously, we used to be carrying only voice. Now we can carry video and voice at the same time. The Ethernet one, it's so you do know that the main purpose of creating Ethernet, Ethernet is created for the purpose of LAN. So LAN is an Ethernet is a LAN protocol. So whenever you expand the Ethernet or the protocol that is used for the LAN to the one, that's what we call it Ethernet 1. So that's the purpose of the Ethernet 1. So Ethernet 1 will work like this, the cables that you use for the LAN. They have a higher speed, only they are usually affected by distance, so you can configure them so that they can be handled for that purpose. So another one is the multi-protocol label switching, or MPLS. MPLS, or the multi-label switching, the multi-protocol label switching. MPLS is, so it's as the name suggests, it's a multi-protocol. So what does a multi-protocol means? When we say multi-protocol, the name itself says multi-protocol. So it can support different types of protocols. The Ethernet, which is a kind of frame relay. The ATM, it's a kind of, you can say, frame relay. DSL, an example of public switch telephone network, frame relay. So you have the shared and the unshared types of networks here. So in the MPLS, multiple networks can be supported by the MPLS technology. So whenever you have a remote user whom you cannot access it through cable, so this is a kind of network where you have the sites where the users exist are very far, which you cannot reach them through cables or different things. You can only reach them through the satellite, or the VSAT, or the VSAT technology, the very small aperture. So this one is used for whenever you have a remote location. So very remote location, if you have it, is used for that purpose. You can see that the signal can travel so many distances. 37,800. So another one is DSL. We said that DSL is a kind of what kind of technology? It's the dial-up technology. But the difference between dial-up and DSL, one of their differences is DSL is an always-on technology. So you're going to pay based on monthly or yearly basis, whether you use it or don't use it. Just you are going to pay for the cable if you use it or you don't use it. That's not the concern for the service provider. So it's always on technology. So a modem is required because it's just one of the types of one of the types of device that can convert analog signal to the digital signal. That's why we call it modem, or the modulator and demodulator is required to convert a signal from an Ethernet to the internet, and so on. So the cable network is previously used to provide TV distribution to the offices and head offices and so on. This is also a kind of an always-on connection, and it's a simple installation. So it's just like the cable that we use for our what we call a dish, or Eurosats, and different types of satellites, so that we can see different programs on TVs, but they can also be used for the purpose of the internet. So another technologies are one infrastructures are the wireless. So you can see the wireless. There are different types of wireless devices, what we call them the municipal Wi-Fi. and WiMAX. So these are different types of wireless technologies. Nowadays, cities are implementing wireless technologies across cities. So another one is the satellite internet. Satellite internet is just like the VSAT with what we have said, but it will provide us a two-way communication between the sender and receiver. 3G cellulars and the long-term evolution LTEs are the ones that are used by the service provider for the transmission of messages and other issues. So they are used for that kind of communication. So usually 3G and 4G, these kinds of network are the wireless network. They are wireless networks which are used by the service provider. So another one is VPN. We have said previously one of the problems with regard to public network was what? Their being free. So whenever you are free, you are susceptible to attack by different users. So in order to prevent this kind of issue, we have a kind of technology, technology called VPN. What's a VPN? VPN means even if you are using the public networks like the internet to transmit messages, your message will not be read by others so that it can be transmitted by hiding it through some different mechanisms. We call this kind of hiding, we call it what? We call VPN. So VPN is a good technology that will enable us for message encryption. Message will be encrypted or between the private network and the public network.